Hello, my name is Sophia Morin, and today I'm going to be talking about generally recognized as safe and just nutrition labeling as a whole. So, a little bit of background. The Nutrition Labeling and Education Act in 1990 was passed to standardize nutrition labels in their content. And this was the first, like, really big initiative that was put into place for nutrition labeling, just food packaging as a whole. And so, why is something such as this important? This is important because of how food directly affects consumer health. According to Hasten, 60% of adults in the US have a chronic disease, which that's a concerningly high percentage, especially since not even just chronic diseases, but a bunch of other diseases and illness, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's heart disease, whatever it might be, are directly affected by the foods that consumers are eating. So on top of this, there's a lot of factors that go into play in terms of why consumers make decisions about certain food choices. Maybe it is such diet or such illnesses and diseases. Maybe it's diet, maybe it's allergens. So there's a lot of different factors that consumers have to think about. So in terms of my thesis, I really just touched upon if simplicity or complexity is better with nutrition labels. So I had one pro of this, which was simplicity. Simplicity is really great because it pushes more consumers to use food labels, especially since a lot of consumers typically don't, even though it's there for consumers in the first place. And a lot of times, just because maybe consumers find it very overwhelming and maybe don't really have a lot of education on how to use food labels, which is why simplicity is great because it pushes people to do so. And then a con of this is information omission. Because simplicity, it just typically focuses on just the most major information that you as a consumer want to know. So typically those like macronutrients, like proteins and carbs, for example. So there's a lot of micronutrients, which is like vitamins and minerals that aren't being regulated on packaging in these labels. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It's kind of up to manufacturers, but there's no real way of tracking these, which is the issue which you need for a healthy diet. And then what I'm going to talk about is self-governed policies as my other negative effect. So what is GRAS? GRAS stands for Generally Recognized as Safe and is one of such self-governed policies. It was part of the Food Additive Amendment of 1958 and basically just allows ingredients to be added to food that are considered safe by experts, either because they've been in circulation for years and there hasn't been any major indication of health effects because of them, or they've been deemed safe by experts. Maybe this expert, somebody hired specifically by a manufacturer, maybe they're other experts in like the food systems, just an expert in general. So since this is under the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration, this has created a big loophole in the system. So effects of GRAS, so health, really begs the question of what's in our food. According to Pomeroz from 1990 to 2010, there's an estimated 1,000 ingredients never reported to the FDA, which equates to about 99% of food additives put into our food without any FDA regulation or regulatory policies put into place. So this is really concerning. Are these ingredients actually safe? Are they not? There's really no way of knowing without such strict regulatory policies. I will say that GRAS was put into place in the first place because this process is a very lengthy process to make sure these foods are safe, and so it's was put into place to kind of as a shortcut for this, which has become a big issue as we can see. So again, this also destroys consumer trust. If you can't trust the FDA, it's kind of like who can you trust? The FDA was put into place originally to be on the side of consumers and to make sure everything consumers are ever encountering, even on top of just food and food packaging, is safe and it doesn't cause any health effects. And if the FDA isn't knowing about all of these, hundreds and thousands of ingredients and doesn't know if they're safe or not, it's kind of, begs the question of what is the FDA actually doing? What other processes are they kind of letting fall through the cracks, if you will, on top of this generally recognized as safe policy? And then who to rely on? So if it seems as though we may not be able to trust the FDA as much as we would like to, there's people taking matters into their own hands. And a stark example of this, according to Pomeroz again, was in California in 2023. California banned 4 substances because they have been linked to a bunch of different health effects. And such substances have actually been banned in Europe for years because of that. And the biggest example is something called BVO, or brominated vegetable oil, which has been linked to nervous system and just general like bodily tissue damage. And the FDA has known about these potential health issues caused by this brominated vegetable oil, but it's kind of had it on the back burner, never really did anything about it until California banned that and the other substances. And then the FDA kind of relooked at all of them and has since banned them on a national level. So, conclusion. So, GRAS, generally recognized as safe, is a big negative effect in terms of the food industry and nutritional labels. There's so many ingredients not undergoing the regulatory policies that they need to in order to ensure that they're safe for consumers, especially when it's such a big issue, even in our health industries. Like, according to Hacker, $1 trillion of the medical industry is coming from these chronic diseases alone. So, what about all of the other, issues that are coming from other health effects aside from that? Really goes to show how important this is. And I would like to also note that the FDA has actually added reforms more recently to their 2026 agenda to relook at this generally recognized as safe policy because of such negative effects that it has been causing. So yeah, that's my presentation, and thank you.